Welcome to the Firehouse Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation. My name's Peter McKenzie. I'm one of the hosts. I'm a retired fire captain with the City of Ventura Fire Department.
And I'm Jason Kay. I'm an active fire captain also with the Ventura Fire Department.
And we are excited that you are going to spend some time with us at the kitchen table, learning about firehouse issues that we're trying to bring awareness to.
Thanks for joining us as we discuss the issues of being a firefighter, both on and off duty, and how it affects us.
Let's get right to it. All right, we'd like to welcome Erik and Maggie Hernandez to the show. So Erik is a firefighter, Maggie is a therapist, and guys, let's introduce yourselves to our listeners. So why don't you each take a quick second and kind of give us a quick bio, and then we can get into the show.
Hey, I'm Maggie. I'm a registered associate marriage and family therapist. I'm actually based in two practices. I'm all Ventura County, so I have an office in Camarillo and an office in Ventura, where I work exclusively with trauma survivors. So my clinical expertise kind of includes counseling first responders, military combat veterans, survivors of complex trauma, addiction. I've had several clients who were survivors of mass casualty events like Borderline and Route 91. I also work with just underserved communities in general. The LGBTQ community, things like that are populations that I'm really close to working with.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot there that we definitely want to get into. Erik, how about you?
Yes, sir. My name's Erik Hernandez, firefighter paramedic with the city of Pasadena. You can find me working up in the Northwest primarily. Love it there. Been on about nine years or so, and then was a volunteer firefighter for about 4 years prior to that. I live here in beautiful Ventura. Nothing against Pasadena, but the weather is so much nicer out here, so it's nice to call it home here. Yeah, I'm married to a beautiful wife, Maggie. We got a couple kids, some dogs, some chickens, old cars, all the above.
Awesome. Glad to have some local Venturans on the podcast. Well, let's get into it. So you guys clearly have a perspective on life that is great interest to us and our listeners. So not only obviously Erik is a firefighter, but Maggie, you work in a professional capacity with first responders and sounds like some other trauma survivors as well. So I think that's going to be the gist of our conversation today.
Great.
Curious what that, like, I don't know that we've ever had a couple on the show where the husband was a firefighter and the wife was a therapist. So that might produce some interesting conversations. You guys also started, and the other thing, let's get out there because I think it's material to the conversation, is you guys also started a nonprofit. So why don't you take a second to kind of tell us what that is? And I know a lot of our listeners, in fact, one of our own guys, I think, fought in one of your nonprofit events. So why don't we talk about that real quick?
Yeah, Russ Skinner fought and won. He put on quite a show actually last year. It was fantastic. Yeah, so we got started in 2019. It was just kind of a thought of there was another couple that we were collaborating with at the time, and the thought was, let's do something to benefit first responders who are facing mental health challenges, because let's be real, y'all see things in just the average day that nobody ever sees and that nobody should ever see. Like, the experiences that first responders have are really, really unique. So I kind of joined around the end of, like, just before when the fight was happening, but they put that event together in, I want to say 6 weeks, right, babe? Like an insanely short period of time. They managed to pull off a phenomenal event. I want to say there were 500 plus attendees. We raised like over $32,000. And it all went to next rung to actually help benefit just first responders who were in need of therapy services and support. We had to kind of hit the pause button for a couple of years just because of COVID. But last year's event, the one that Skinner fought in for us, was phenomenal. I don't even know, ballpark, probably about 700 people were there, start to finish. We raised over $40,000. So again, all money that went to benefiting firefighters, paramedics, law enforcement officers, veterans who desperately need therapy services.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How did it start? Like, what was the nexus for getting it going?
Well, I think it was one of those where, in the fire service, we think to ourselves, what's something that would draw large masses of people? And I think it was important for us to get people together from different departments, different walks of life, different experiences, whether you're a 30-year guy or a 3-day guy, and really just get them all in the same area. So we were roundtabling and thinking about different ways, and it's kind of where 809 Fight for Awareness came to fruition. 809 is our union number. Fight for Awareness. There was 4 of us. It all kind of just played into itself. But really it was, what's an event that's going to get a ton of people together, and more importantly, get those people talking and get them interacting with one another. So getting different departments, again, with different experiences and different levels, suddenly people were able to make the connection that even though we're different, we have a lot of things in common, right? The same hardships that the wives at Cal Fire are feeling are the same ones that we're feeling. So we're 100 miles away from each other, different departments, different experiences, but we're all kind of going through the same things. And really that was the nexus for it, is how can we get X amount of people together? And more importantly, how can we get them interacting and conversing with one another? So you throw in the competitiveness of the boxing event with different departments fighting each other, all in the same area, and suddenly conversations were being had and friendships were being made.
Yeah, and I think we knew it had to be something physical, because that, it's just that community tends to gravitate toward that. I mean, you could have, a symposium where you're going to have speakers come and talk and stuff, and that's great. I mean, there's value to those, but you're probably not going to get a whole lot of law enforcement officers who want to go spend a day off listening to, someone go over there and talk, but they will go to a boxing match because it's a hell of a lot more fun. And I think just really the impetus for it was seeing there's an increased awareness just around first responder mental health needs in general. But I think the consciousness was really starting to shift around 2019 toward that, because I think that Ruderman paper, I don't know who's familiar with it. We cite it in our on our website, but it's something that I work with a lot too. Just the stats around first responder suicides, and how in 2017 was where it started to shift, where line of duty deaths started to be exceeded by suicides, and they are still exceeded by suicides. The gap between the two has not really shifted. So it was just more of a, hey, we see a problem. I feel like first responders, Erik always jokes that he's a professional problem solver. It's, you see a problem. It's like, all right, well, what can we do? What can we do to help fix it?
Yeah, cool. So I want to give a little bit of nuance to the conversation too. First of all, at Station 3, you guys know where that is, being in town right by Buena. Right over the door we go out of to go on calls is Skinner in a full Rocky Balboa pose with his arm up successfully after fighting in your event, which is just awesome. I would have gone. I was on duty. Some guys have to work, unfortunately, but everybody, we had live streaming going on at all the stations. The sponsors were super fun. It was awesome. Just so you guys know, it was super far reaching. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is that Erik and I have some common folks that we know and we hang out with. I was actually hired by Chief Downs, who was the chief of Pasadena for a while. And then my son worked for one of the Verdugo departments at Glendale as an AO. So the same dispatchers as Pasadena.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I got to run a call with your son right before he got hired on. I may have ran one of his last calls as an AO.
It's such a small world, man. It's such a small community. I love it.
Yeah, so I want to get into a little bit into some of the specifics. Maggie, on your bio that you sent us, you kind of cited that in all caps, I changed careers because I needed to make a difference in the lives of others.
Yes.
So that was a little bit of a late career shift for you. And after you had a successful career doing something else, what was it in your perspective that you were saying, I'm not fulfilled by what I'm doing and I need to do something else?
Okay. I love this question. I was in business development and marketing for close to 18 years. And, I was good at it. I did it for a long time, and it, made a really nice paycheck to bring home to my family. But I never felt like I was doing something of measurable worth outside of, what I was seeing in my bank account. And I think when I met Erik, we've been married for 7 years, together for 8. When I met him and was hearing him talk about what he does every day for a living, and just hearing him say, sometimes it's criminal that I get to take a paycheck for what I do because I love it so much and I'm so passionate about this. And he would come home and tell me about calls that he had been on, and I would hear about the hard ones, so I valued being able to hear that stuff, but I would hear about the good ones too, about, we showed up on scene and this kid was struggling and we were able to help them. And basically they're alive today because of, the things that he did. And it really put everything I was doing into very sharp relief. And so it was always kind of a thought that I would go back to school.
Yeah, let's talk about your support network. Is that just for first responders, or is that for all of your clients?
My support group is going to be for first responder partners. And then I work with both partners and the first responders in my practice.
And these are these mainly people that you're already working with, or are you putting it out to like everyone, or what does that look like?
I'm putting it out to everyone. I've just kind of started, employing some of my marketing skills and using them with clients. So just putting it out there and saying, hey, I do work with first responders and taking new clients.
Awesome. We might need to talk offline because that's one of the things that we're not struggling with, but brainstorming around on like how to increase awareness and build community around this topic, because I think there's so many fragmentations because there's departments that are different. There's states that are different. There's different, even within fire departments, you work for the county, the feds, there's just all this fragmentation involved that sometimes it's hard to cross those lines and get everybody on the same page.
Yeah.
We strongly believe the same way you guys do in that it's cool that the firefighters get the, hey, good job. Hey, here's, have a cup of coffee on us and whatnot. But the ones that are neglected are the ones at home, the wives, the kids. As much as it is that I'm bummed to miss a Christmas presentation or some sort of school activity, like my kids are just as bummed too. But I think they so often sit in the shadows and don't get the recognition that they deserve that we selfishly do. And I think that's what's important to Maggie and I to represent not just the first responders, but the core support system behind the first responder, that they're just as important and just as valued. And we really want them to understand that. So that was the main focus, or that's one of the main focuses of our nonprofit, is not just the first responder, but the community of the first responder, and getting them engaged and getting them just as much help and attention as the first responder themselves. So it's awesome to hear you guys have the same outlook.
Yeah, you're speaking our language, and we got big plans, and we're working on stuff, and I'm really excited about the direction we're going. But it's in line with that, which is take care of the people back at home. So
yeah, a few years ago, we all started the peer support teams on the fire department. That was kind of a big push. You guys have one in Pasadena, I'm assuming too, and that was when we started seeing guys really want to be able to have. After the CISM push where nobody would do anything but peer support, everybody actually wanted to communicate and talk, or at least hang out for a few hours and take a break from running calls and talk about what's going on. And a couple of years later, we realized the spouses just had nobody to go to. And there wasn't much in the way of therapists who could relate to that side of things. So Erik, I want to talk about your story a little bit and how you came from where we all come from, which is usually like a 25 to 30-year-old super full of testosterone and piss and vinegar and ready to fight fires and can handle the world, to getting to a place where you realize that mental health is a real issue in the fire department, and what led you kind of down that path to start the nonprofit with your wife that you guys do now.
Yeah, all excellent questions. So I haven't spent too long in the fire service compared to a lot of people, right? It's only 9.5 years, and even then I feel silly throwing in that half part, but I feel like it makes a difference. But it hasn't been too long where in our department, you'd run a critical call and the captain would either just kind of glance back in the back of the engine. They'd be like, "Hey, everyone's good, right?" It was almost implied like, "Hey, this is what we signed up for. No one's going to say anything. Everyone knows it was a tough call, but we're not going to talk about it."
The suck it up generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was kind of the whole mindset of, hey, this is what you signed up for. And yes, to an extent, it is what we signed up for, but we also signed up to be human. And there's still that element of it, right? And I think for so long, we kind of neglected that. And that, unfortunately, is leading to the statistics that we have today. Everything that happened 5 years ago is all starting to compound. So I think for us, I'm very fortunate to work for Pasadena. I feel like the leadership and the chiefs that we have right now are amazing, and I genuinely mean that. Like they're very personable. They take a humanistic approach to things. That yes, we are first responders. Yes, we are professionals, but we're still husbands, sons, fathers, all the above. And I don't think they've lost sight of that. So I'm very grateful for that, and I'll give them the recognition they deserve. So with that came the mindset that we have at Pasadena, where peer support is paramount. Being able to host events like the boxing event, The next event that we have coming up, that Maggie and I have coming up, is, best way to describe it is like an elevated date night for first responders and their significant others. We partnered up with a culinary school in Pasadena, and we're going to be hosting a date night where the first responder and their significant other can get together. We're going to learn to make dinner. We're going to learn to make plates from scratch and really just have this bonding environment, right? But the Chiefs are going to be attending that as well. That's the type of environment that we harbor at Pasadena. So that made it a really easy transition where I've always felt like mental health was important. I myself have seen multiple therapists, went through a pretty rough divorce, and that was kind of my introduction into therapy and the benefits of it. Had the unfortunate circumstance of getting kind of flashover maybe about 5 years ago or so. So I had some trauma associated with that. Went to go see a therapist with it. So I've firsthand seen the benefits of therapy and various types of therapy. So if I can be that conduit to others to say, hey, it really does work. Like, you've got to be vulnerable and you've got to be willing to put yourself out there. And not necessarily that you have to be willing to discuss it with others, but I feel like I am, because if there's still that stigma attached to therapy, if I could be the one person that's like, believe it or not, I tried it actually worked, then maybe that can be what causes the next person, and so on and so forth. And then, you kind of see the ripple effect go on.
I think the really important thing for Erik was having someone who got the lifestyle and got like that cultural competency piece was really, really vital. Because I think, yes, he did see a therapist when he was going through his divorce. And he said, that the therapist would come in and say, well, when you go home on Wednesday night, like, do this on Wednesday night, like have a date night. He was like, yeah, I don't go home until Friday unless I get mandoed. And then I go home on Saturday, maybe Sunday, who knows? So yeah, like having someone who really understood that piece, I think his therapist that he sees,
that cultural competency piece is so huge for therapy. We've had therapists on here before where they speak even to how it's important to be culturally competent so that they can say IFSTA or they can say, flashover, and it's important that they know what we're talking about and that they know that routine is impossible in our job. So when they say every night go to bed at this time so you get a good night's sleep, you kind of laugh at them and go, okay, I'm never going back to that guy.
Oh no, right? Sleep hygiene is right out the window. Yeah. I don't even get into it with my guys.
So we have a ton of podcasts, and we've talked to a lot of professionals on sleep as well. Those are probably our two big pushes are the therapy and the sleep. I'm kind of the same way, Erik, where I expect to, after a big call, to need peer support and to need some kind of therapy for my team. And if I can be on top and be the one who's recommending it to the guys in the backseat or whatever, then I think that's huge, that they see that you've been through it too. It's not a shameful thing. It's something that just brings you back to normalcy. Like you talked about, of being just a human being. Underneath it all, we're all just human beings, right? I want to talk a little bit about your EMDR that you did for your therapy. And first of all, tell me how many times and what you did for therapy before that. You don't have to be specific. And then go into what EMDR is, how that helped you. And then also all the way down to Maggie being a traditional therapist. What do you think of EMDR after you're done? So go ahead, Erik, start that out.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Maggie for a little help on exactly what EMDR stands for.
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
It was right on the tip of my tongue. So I actually learned about it through somebody at work, two people at work, actually. So I kept having these flashbacks to the flashover. And it would just happen at random times. Like, it's not times where I felt like I was stressed. I would literally be driving down the freeway and I would just get these flashes of, I remember distinctly, I'm on the third floor and I'm looking at this hallway. This hallway's kind of getting ready to light off. And I see my hose start to go and the outer lining of the jacket is starting to burn through. Looking over the balcony and thinking to myself, I got one of two options. I either jump off the third floor balcony, but I remember thinking it's going to hurt and I'm probably going to break my back, or running towards the hallway that's about to flash on me. And then my captain at the time yelling something, seeing my firefighter jump over the railing to get out of the way, and then just committing and running towards the door, and then never making it to the door, and just feeling, I thought the ceiling collapsed on me. I remember looking down, the floor lighting off. I remember my hose lighting off, the floor underneath me lighting off, and then I thought the ceiling fell, and I thought I was trapped. So it was one of those where it was just these most random times. I'd be asleep, and I'd sense it. I'd be driving, I'd be with my kids at the park having a blast, and I'd get these flashbacks. So I was talking to somebody there at our peer support, and they were vulnerable about it. and they were the ones who introduced me to it. And they were like, hey, have you tried? At the time, I didn't. And quite frankly, I was reluctant to. Right? I was what I just discussed 5 minutes ago, where we're very hesitant, we're not quite open to change. So I didn't really think too much of it. And then as Maggie was going through school, she mentioned it. And I was like, hey, I've heard of this before. I actually know somebody who did it and got her take on it. And Maggie swore by it. Still didn't take them up on it. And then was talking to another guy on our peer support, and he said he had done it. So I'm like, all right, listen, either everyone's wrong or I'm wrong. I at least owe it to myself to try it.
Good for you.
So met with a culturally competent therapist, and I want to say there was two sessions that truly led up to the event before we did EMDR. And really it was replaying the event. So that's the hard part. The hard part is having to relive this thing, right? And the hard part was, all right, we're going to find the point that really triggers you. And then we're going to think about that point. We're going to dwell on it, but we're going to replace it with something that brings joy to you. So we're not going to forget about the event, but we're going to reprogram it so that it's not as much of a traumatic event, but we're not going to lose sight of it. So we got to all that, and then came the actual EMDR session itself. So you can do it in person. I like to do it through Zoom, and it's just this, for me, it was like this ball that tracks across the screen, and you're watching it, and then it slows down, it speeds up, and it varies. And then it's kind of cool. I'm watching this thing, and then suddenly it almost looks like a strobe light's going on, right? And suddenly you're in this mindset, and it's like almost like I was there again, and I could feel my skin's getting flushed. That was the hard part. The hard part was like I'm reliving this thing, and suddenly I remember thinking I was so bummed that I hadn't made a choice. Like I put myself in this position, and then as I'm reliving it, all of a sudden I start my heart rate slows down. I start skip breathing, and subconsciously I'm doing this, and I'm not really catching it. And all of a sudden, it's this. But wait, I did do something. And it's like, I did control my breathing, and I did do this. And everything that I had second guessed, suddenly I'm reliving it, only I'm reliving it in a slower pace. And I wasn't helpless. I did do something. Maybe I didn't do enough, but it was a true learning lesson. And then really starting to think about the positive sides of it. Like, I'm still here in this office, and I still have, the memories of my kids, and I'm looking forward to picking them up, and we're going to hang out. And I probably did that for, I think it was 2 sessions. So it was 4 sessions total. It was 2 leading up to it, 2 themselves. And after the first one, I didn't want to do the second one. Like the first one was pretty deep, ended it in about 30 minutes or so instead of going the full hour. And then the second one went about 45 minutes. And then that was it. And like I can talk about it now. And I share that experience with people. And I don't even think about it anymore unless I'm discussing it in things like this. But it's not going to come back and haunt me anymore.
Yeah.
So it's cool that what used to just pop up at these most random, inopportune times are now things that I can reflect on and I can share with others. And still can't tell you what it is EMDR stands for, but I can tell you that it is very effective and it works. I believe in it.
So just to bring it full circle, did you get injured on that? And I'm assuming you're back to work, right? What's going on with that?
Yeah. So burned up the ear pretty good, burned up the back pretty good. And then it was pretty gnarly. It got so hot that the rivets on the jacket themselves etched right into my wrist. So one of those were like, they look like cigarette burns. And I'm like, I have no idea what these things are. And then took a look and it was like, they got so hot in that split second, they singed right in. Yeah, then a couple weird looks on my ear, and back to normal. Okay,
good. I'm glad to hear that. And Maggie, obviously, you supported that EMDR in those sessions. It sounds like you were a part of that recovery. What
100%.
kind of schooling do you get in your therapy education? And what do you know about that side of it too?
So sadly, we don't get a ton of training on EMDR in in the master's programs for this. It's something that we have to pursue outside of that. I actually learned about EMDR because one of my professors in, I think, my first year of grad school was going through her EMDR training and certification. And she was just kind of explaining it to us and saying, it's literal magic, guys. Like, this is what happens and this is how it works. So that really kind of inspired me to start doing more of the research around it and learning more about, okay, how does it work? What is this bilateral stimulation? Why is it so effective? Like what's actually happening there? And just kind of getting to learn all the bits and pieces about that. But I 100%, I was a cheerleader for him, like just saying, please, oh God, please do please do therapy for this. Please do EMDR for this. I really think it's going to be effective. And I think we talked about a few different therapy approaches, but EMDR just felt like the most natural for him to do for this because I could see the effect it was having on him.
And so many times the firefighters are going to therapy, not even for themselves. I mean, obviously it is for yourself, but the wife or, even the kids deserve you to be fully present when you're home. Yeah. And as I get older and I've been in the fire service a while, I think to myself, so much stuff I do at work is so I'm able to have a good work-life balance. And it's back at home. You're okay for your wife and your kids. Because at work, you're still there and you're in it. And it's almost subconscious what you're going to do. And your daily life is so routine and not really routine per se, but scheduled is what I mean. Everything is by the book.
Yeah,
what you're going to wear. Yeah. Structured. Thank you. What you're going to wear and what you're going to do. And those tones go off and you're always going to be, you're going to follow orders and you're going to follow the EMD and what you do for medical calls. So yeah, it's good to hear that. So on a lighter note, Peter talked about we haven't had couples who are on here before who are therapists and firefighters, but it does seem like a lot of therapists marry projects, firefighters, cops, military. So I think you're saying, Maggie, you didn't get into this until after you guys were together.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you find yourself having professional type conversations a lot to where because I think it would be tough to have my spouse be a therapist. Yeah. Erik, do you ever look at her and go, okay, turn it off. I just want to talk to you normally right now. How does that
we
look?
just got an argument yesterday.
I was going to say, we just talked about it yesterday.
In regards to the kids and how it is we handle the situation. And I was throwing, and how did that make you feel? Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. And we're good. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, but
he was
we showed the dynamic.
He was kind of being a jerk about it, but we parent in different ways. Well, and this is something, I mean, and first responder spouses can speak to this too. Like we parent in very different ways because we're with the kids so much, and we're with the kids more than our partners are. So we're going to have a different lens when it comes to parenting our kids. This particular one was like our son had a nightmare and Erik goes into work brain of, okay, well, let me solve the problem. It was probably because of you were playing Roblox. So F it, there's no more Roblox. He obviously didn't say F it to the kid, but forget it. Roblox is getting uninstalled from your iPad that you were playing the other day. Whereas I come at it with, okay, well, let's talk about what the nightmare was about. Let's, can you draw me a picture of the nightmare? Let's describe this to me. Like, tell me what happens in your body when we're looking at this picture. So 100% I'm therapizing, my kids, but to me, like, and for them, I think too, it feels really effective to do that. Like we're exploring the emotions and I'm letting them know, like, it's okay to have these conversations about our feelings and stuff. And having to remind Erik, like, bro, shut off that work brain. You're home right now. And that's something that I think all first responders kind of come up against is they're in work brain all the time. Like, and it's two different stages of like, it's hypoarousal down here and then hyperarousal. Like at work, hyperarousal, you are always on high alert. You're always doing stuff. Like you're that professional problem solver. So you're up here all the time. Then there's like this normal range, but you're never in that as a first responder. You're then, when you're home, you're in that hypoarousal. You want to be left alone. You don't want to make decisions. You're just kind of like apathetic, basically. You're just like, just leave me alone. I want to friggin' sleep. I want to just, don't make me make decisions right now. I don't give a damn what we have for dinner. You figure it out, please.
There's so much Minda O's coming off
yeah,
you. Do you guys know her? Yeah, we did some seminars with her for the wives too. And I mean, talk about eye-opening. But this is firefighter, therapist, and it could just be anybody, right? It's also just mom and dad and the two ways that you parent.
Totally.
It's just differently ways to raise your kids. Go ahead, Pete.
I want to chime back in, and Jason, that you stole my line of thought for sure. But I want to add a little bit to it. So, and this is for Maggie. Maggie, do you find that you recognize things in Erik that maybe a non-therapist firefighter wife wouldn't recognize, like because of your professional training? And if you see or hear Erik, or what, I'm sure you can read him every which way from Sunday, but like, do you find yourself like identifying those things? And then, because we're talking about work brain from from Erik, because I would assume that you probably are easily triggered into work brain if you see something that you know you can address from Erik. So that kind of goes both ways. What does that look like? Is that happen or is that not a thing?
Oh, no, it happens. Yeah, it happens. I think for sure, just doing what I do and hearing the stories I hear every day. Yeah, my spidey senses are up when I'm at home, even just especially because like, I mean, yes, all of my first responders matter, but not all of them are my husband. Like my husband is obviously going to be like the number one. So he says something, if he mentions a call, that was really difficult. There was one not too long ago where, we were just talking about it and he's crying, I'm crying. And I was just like, I just need to know that you're good. Like, let's talk about this so that I know that you're good. So yeah, I definitely hear things differently, and he'll mention something and I'll be like, all right, note to self, keep an eye out, like watch out for any kind of like intrusive thoughts that are coming up, like any of the symptoms in PTSD, anything that's going to come up around that. Yeah.
And I would imagine that's probably a little bit irritating to Erik sometimes, would be my guess. Is that accurate,
Probably.
Erik? Or
Yeah, but it's healthy though, right? I mean, we do straddle that fine line, and there's times where I'll flat out, mention, I'm like, listen, I don't want to talk to a therapist right now. I want to talk to my wife.
Yeah.
And I think the same way that we so often shift back into work brain, I think she has the same thing too, right? Like at the end of the day, we're both professionals, but we're also humans. We're also still husband and wife. So it's just reminding each other in the same way that she reminds me of like, hey, you're not at work. Slow down.
Yeah.
In the same way that I'm able to call her out. And I think as long as we have that mutual respect for one another, then it's beneficial and it works for us.
Yeah, I would. This is fascinating to me, by the way, because I'm wondering if, because of your professional spidey sense, I think you called it, Maggie, when there's a problem. And what would be awesome is if we could train spouses to like pick up on these things without all the years of professional education that you have, because my guess is there's a ton of guys running around who really do need the help, but aren't getting the help. And if they had a spouse to like kick them in the butt and like get them what they need, we'd be much better off, because frankly, the guys at the firehouse, they're okay, I would say, at like recognizing guys that are in trouble, but they're not good at it. And
Yeah.
if the guy at the fire department's recognizing it, more than likely the guy who they're looking at is in some sort of crisis, whereas the spouse is at home, is seeing everyday stuff. So I don't know what the opportunity, like, could you train someone without all the, becoming a therapist to like recognize these things and prompt care to be given? Or what are your thoughts on that?
100%. That's actually one of the goals around the first responder partner group that I'm going to be running is, these are the things to look out for. Let's really, and everyone has to have each other's backs on, their wives who are friends who are going to be in this group who are like, yeah, we can look out for each other. And like, if I see something, if we're all hanging out, if I see something in your husband that I think is concerning, I want to come to you. But yeah, absolutely. Training the wives and showing them like, these are the things to look out for. Because we're going to see, yes, like at the firehouse, there's one piece, right? But then we see a different side of you guys when you're at home. So we're going to see more of the vulnerability. We're going to see, like the more human side rather than just the work side.
We're just talking through this because we struggle for how can we actually like tactically help the people at home, because it's difficult to do, right? And I mean, maybe this is an avenue worth exploring, the whole training the family back at home for things to look out for. One other line of question that I have for you, Maggie, is what is the difference between a firefighter or a first responder traumatic patient that you're seeing and someone from a different community that arguably probably is seeing things equally as traumatic? Are there differences, or at its core, is it the same?
There's two different schools of thought where it's like there's degrees of trauma. And yeah, there are degrees of trauma. But I think just because of what I work with, I work exclusively with domestic violence survivors, sexual assault survivors. I've got some trans clients who have been horrifically raped, and some of these things are just, my God, no one should ever have to experience these things. And it's almost the same thing with first responders. It comes down to no one should ever have to experience that. So it's like that kind of trauma is what I work with. So for me, there's not varying degrees.
It's the same. So it's the same.
Yeah, for me it is. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's
where my mind goes.
I bet it has to do with the amount too. So you have PTSD for a normal person who maybe has that horrible incident once or hopefully never twice in their life. And then you have first responders who are like, oh, that's a regular part of my being, right?
That complex, the complex PTSD part, 100%. Well, and like, because I work with marginalized communities, they've already got some adverse childhood experiences, some adverse community environments that they're dealing with too. So it just kind of layers on, and most sexual assault survivors will be assaulted again at some point, just statistically speaking. So the complex trauma piece is there. Yeah. So that complex trauma piece is there for those survivors as well. But I think particularly with first responders and, combat veterans, what I'm seeing more often is like, it's so repetitive. Like, it's not, yes, there might be a sexual assault survivor who's had 2 or 3 assaults, and I'm not minimizing that experience for them. It's horrific and they deserve care and help and, that love and healing energy that we can give them. But for first responders, just given the repetition of it, and there's no downtime for them in between. It's, the turning around and looking at the guy, but you good? Okay. Cause we're going to another call. Like, there was this gunshot, whatever, GSW, there was a 5-year-old that got hit. Okay. You good? Cause we got to go to another one where there's a pregnant mom who's hemorrhaging and we don't know what's going on. And then, okay, after that, you good? Good. Cause we got to go to this giant car accident. It's that repetition. You don't see that anywhere else.
Yeah. So do you have anything specifically for PTSD first responder that you would say is an intervention that you like to ask them to go through, or something that we can even do on our own when something's recognized for that? Where do you tend to go with that?
What I tend to do, I believe the cognitive piece, like the thought processes around the trauma, are really important. I focus a lot more on the somatic piece. So yes, in EMDR, we're going to ask you to recount what happened. I want to know, like, what are the emotions? What are the feelings? Like, where are you sensing some of this stuff? Like for Erik, when he was describing some of the stuff, like the emotions that would come up around when he got burned up was, he was feeling this stuff in the pit of his stomach. His chest would get tight. His heart would start racing. So I focus more on like the somatic piece, because I think sometimes with the cognitive stuff, if you're just talking about the event itself, you're kind of re-traumatizing the person in some instances. So, I mean, you kind of have to kind of take it on a case-by-case basis. But I like to focus on the somatic stuff. In terms of things that people can do in between calls, something I've worked with Erik on, something I've worked with most of my clients on, is just breathing techniques, like that box breathing. Box breathing will literally get you out of an anxiety attack or a panic attack, that kind of panic response of breathing in for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding for 4, and just continuing that pattern. Once you get to a place where you're feeling a little more regulated, going into a 4-7-8 breathing pattern, breathing in for 4, holding for 7, and exhaling for 8. And just kind of doing that actually slows your heart rate down, just kind of gets that, gets you out of that fight or flight response, gets your brain into a little more chill spot. It actually also helps you sleep too. So it can be really effective to do it in the middle of the night when you're on a call, rather than picking up your phone, is, because that blue light's going to just keep you up longer. It's doing those breathing
I love
exercises.
the biohacks.
Totally.
Hi, I'm Austin Folk, an engineer with the Ventura City Fire Department. I'm also on the board of the Ventura Fire Foundation, an organization that supports firefighters and their families. The foundation produces this podcast as part of our mission. I worked with the foundation because I was witness to the help that it was able to provide to my family. The foundation needs your help. First, please subscribe and rate this podcast on your podcast platform. This helps us get a higher ranking and more visibility for the show. Second, if you support the podcast and the foundation's work, please consider donating. Every dollar helps us support firefighters and their families. There's a link in the show notes, or you can donate through the website at www.venturafirefoundation.org. Thank you for listening.
You mentioned, Maggie, somatic. What can you define what that is? We would like to keep these things understandable for some people, myself included.
No, that's cool. Sorry, I can revert to therapist speak sometimes. The somatic side so much just refers to body, so just like the bodily sensations that come up. Yeah, because there's two kind of schools of thought, of like the cognitive piece of just kind of going with like thoughts, behaviors, and like that kind of thing, which is all great. Like we want to address that part too. But I think having that somatic awareness too is really important. Like understanding Oh, I am getting into that heightened space. Like I do feel my heart start to race. I'm feeling like my breathing pattern has changed. Like my stomach is feeling tight, or I feel like I want to throw up. Like those are the somatic pieces that we pay attention to.
Gotcha. One more. I feel like I'm asking you all the questions, Maggie.
It's okay.
I feel like I know what Erik has to say because we're basically the same, right? So, Maggie, so you have your therapy background, and then you also are a spouse of a wife or of a firefighter, and you understand the whole fire department culture. If you could fix this in one way, or if you could make one impact and you had all the authority in the world to do it, to help with, mental health for the firefighters and the wives and the kids and all the things, like, what would that be? What would you do? What would like the one or two things you would do that would make the biggest difference with all these issues?
Oh, wow. Only one or two.
Yeah, you can't fix it all.
I know. Well, I think some of it's already kind of being done. Like that mandatory wellness check once a year, I think is fantastic. Like everyone has to check in, at least at Pasadena. I know Ventura PD has to do this as well. I would imagine fire does, where you have to check in once a year with a mental health professional and just, kind of go through, are we good? Are we feeling okay? What are some things that are coming up? I would love to have those more often. I think, having a therapist who can at least like visit stations on a regular basis would be amazing. Like that's something I would aspire to get to, like being able to visit stations and be like, everyone good? I'm here, like kind of like having a sports psychologist on site for a sports team, like being on site, being able to be on site more and say like, hey, I'm going to be in here for the next few hours. Like I've got half a day where I'm just going to be in this office. If anyone needs to talk, come on in, doors open. And yeah, I'd love to have stuff like that.
Okay. So easier access to care.
Yeah. Access is huge.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. No, I like it. It's a good question. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay. I'm going to ask my standard question too, because I know that's one we always like to ask of the therapist. So right now there's a lot of PTSD injury leave and there's a lot of stress leave. Do you think that podcasts like this and just awareness of bringing more and more awareness to these issues is causing people to become more stressed out or to need more leave because it's kind of always all over the place being told maybe this is wrong with you? Because I've heard this from some higher level folks or some older guys that are thinking that you should just still kind of shove it down. But when you keep bringing it up and you keep talking about it, maybe this is the reason that people are having issues, right? Because they keep hearing, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me and I can't just get over it. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm hearing when we have a few guys who are off on long-term leave and we have people that probably should be on stress leave that don't want to take it because of these issues. But tell me about kind of your thoughts on just the awareness surrounding it and where that leaves us as a community.
I think sometimes there can be a risk around like, oh, there's all these things that could be wrong with you. And, some people will start to kind of go that way with it. I, generally speaking, at least for this population, I think, just like cancer is kind of a presumptive thing, like firefighting causes cancer. Fact. Firefighting causes PTSD. Like being a law enforcement officer causes PTSD. And I think it's the PTSD thing is still kind of a debate about, like, a lot of people like to call it PTSI. I continue to refer to PTSD. So sorry if it's not a semantics game. It's diagnosable for PTSD. But I think, sure, there might be some isolated incidents of that, but I don't think, broadly speaking, that most people are saying like, oh, these things could be wrong with me. I should probably get to therapy. I think every first responder can benefit from therapy. Y'all see things on a regular basis that no one should ever have to see. And you have to fix problems that no one should ever have to fix. So, So follow
up to that.
Yeah.
Do you think that earlier interventions or more awareness / therapy towards issues would decrease the amount of time or retirements even that people need to be off to deal with this stuff that's real?
Absolutely. I think, having a therapist introduced to like new cohorts who are coming in, like in the academy, introducing them to a therapist and saying, hey, even in the academy, what you guys are doing, you're having to do like superhuman things. Like there are the numbers of injuries that are coming out of just people who are in academies. It's wild. Erik would tell me stories about his group who went through. there were knee injuries, there were shoulder injuries, and everyone's having to cover it up, right? Because you don't want to get kicked out, because, you definitely don't want to wash out of the academy. This is the job that you're hoping for. Like, you've put everything toward this. But yeah, introducing them to a therapist then and saying, like, there are people who understand this lifestyle who are available to you. And again, with that access piece.
Yeah, I believe we're working on getting more regular checkups in our department.
Beautiful.
Erik, maybe you can lead me into, as far as Pasadena, you said they're kind of on the leading edge of some of the peer support stuff and the PTSD stuff. What do you guys do that you think is maybe hands and shoulders above some of the other departments, or that's super beneficial?
Yes, I would argue we're very progressive when it comes to the mental health side of it. So not only do we have a peer support team made up by us, but we also rely on other Area C counterparts. So if there's any other departments within our jurisdiction within Area C, can call upon our resources in the same way that we can call upon their resources. I think there's still a little bit of a stigma attached with, yes, we have a peer support, but I don't want to talk to Joe from 36A, because then everyone's going to know about it. But I am a little bit more likely to talk to the guy down the street who wears a different badge, who still gets it, but I don't have to see him every day. So I think that's beneficial, where we're able to utilize each other's peer support teams. If someone doesn't feel comfortable coming to ours, we do have yearly check-ins. So every member once a year sits with a culturally competent therapist. And really, it's up to that individual how serious they want to take it, right? We're not going to force it in like, hey, you have to open up, and if you're not crying by the end of this, then you haven't succeeded. It really is just a good old-fashioned check-in, but there's also avenues for lead up after that. And no one needs to know about it other than you, because it's a one-on-one session. And then we're also introducing it early on at the academy, where we take a couple hours of the academy. And like little kids, they only know what it is you teach them, right? They only know what habits it is you instill in them. So if we instill in them before they even hit the floor on day one that mental health is real, but there's also avenues and there's also resources for you, then that's all they know. So we're big fans of control what you can, influence what you can't. I can control bringing someone in and letting you know the resources. I can influence you into believing that we're not just going to talk mental health, we're actually going to show examples of it, and we're going to lead it. And our membership's not afraid to say, hey, I went to therapy and it works. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking it, and then having the support from the chiefs themselves, where we can easily call upon them and ask for resources. And one of our battalion chiefs oversees peer support, so we have one person to go to instead of having to send 10 different emails. And then the last thing we did, again, did some pretty good groundwork. The last thing we did was allocate some funds towards IOD injuries that are mentally related, so, or mental health in nature. Whereas before it was kind of a pain, where if you went IOD, you had to go through the city structure, you went with a non-culturally competent therapist, and then it turned more of a pain to get back to work than anything else. And it did, I think it set us back. It dissuaded people from accessing that resource. And then when we allocated FD funds specifically for it, it became so much easier because it streamlined the process. We could go straight to a culturally competent therapist that anyone else in the city couldn't access. They were specific to us. And then those funds went straight towards the first 3 sessions. So you had an intake plus 3 sessions. And then if you still wanted to continue it afterwards, then they could help you migrate using the type of insurance that you had, and finding someone within that network that was also culturally competent. So you took someone from at a crisis and then still provided them with aftercare.
Yeah, leadership in Pasadena from a wife perspective and from a therapist perspective, the shift since, the leadership change has kind of taken place over the last few years has really been lovely to see and to be part of. And I really do think they're setting a great example for other departments.
Yeah, that's awesome. Erik, what is the future of 809 group that you founded? What's the vision for that? What are you doing with it? What can we look forward to?
Yeah, so we've got our next event coming up on September 29th. I love that you guys believe in the kitchen table in the fire service. If you're listening to this and you're not a firefighter, We firmly believe that there's not a single problem in the world that can't get solved at the kitchen table. You could take away all the equipment, you just could never remove a firehouse kitchen table, right? So that's kind of where we're shifting into our next one on September 29th in Pasadena. It's an elevated date night, so we're going to have husband and wives, girlfriend, boyfriend, all of the above. We're going to make fresh pasta. And for us, it's something, what's a skill that we could learn that we could incorporate back into the fire service, as well as take back in your own personal life. And it's something that you could do with a significant other that you could bond over with one another, and you could do together. And then more importantly, that you get first responders as well as spouses or significant others together in the same safe space where you're not talking therapy, you're not talking trauma, you're just bonding. And you're realizing that you have a whole lot in common with one another. Not just focusing on the first responder, but really focusing on the dynamic of the family and how to introduce events that aren't just for first responders. It's events for the family and the cores. And it's things that appeal to not just first responders, the way boxing does. It's things that appeal to everyone.
Yeah.
And again, it's something that we hope if someone attends can then take it back to their fire station and be like, hey, I learned this new skill. We should do something with 36B and have something over. I'll lead it. And then we can have something here at the station. It's a way to get the family and the kids together and make it a family event.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're shifting towards.
That's awesome. Yeah. What's the bigger picture? Is there a longer term vision? Like what does success look like, 3 years from now for the organization?
Yeah, so we're partnering with other organizations as well. Like the Overwatch Collective is huge for us. They support not only first responders, but they also support law enforcement, active, retired military, all of the above. So really we want to create this network of not just us, but organizations like yours, organizations like that, where it's a big network for someone who needs resources, who wants resources. And even if we're not subject matter experts on what it is they need, we can rely on other organizations that we do work with who can help them and guide them in the right path and help us as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I know that probably similar to what you guys have experienced. What we've experienced is, we're the Ventura Fire Foundation. We started with Ventura Firefighters started the thing, like Ventura. But the reality is It's not Ventura. It's all of us. Right. It's all the same. Which is why what I was curious with on yours, because now we're like expanding our horizons and envisioning something much larger, because that's what matters. It doesn't matter that we work for Ventura Fire Department. It literally matters not, right? And then I could even argue that the fire department doesn't matter because there's police and military and all these other people that are also in the same shoes, right? So just curious what your guys' thoughts were, but that's great. I think it's awesome what you guys are doing, and we would love to collaborate, work together, do whatever is necessary to help both of our organizations. But
that would be great. I know another thing for just my own personal passion project with 809 is that in further to helping support the spouses and the kids, there's another Pasadena firewife who is also a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she and I have been talking quite a bit about, do we do some spouse retreats, and sometimes weekends are just not possible. Like these really long retreats, sometimes it's not possible. So maybe we do every Friday we get together and we can go for a hike or something as much as possible, even if we're just getting together for a Zoom session, just hanging out and talking, being able to have something to support the spouses is something where, we have done the fights and all those things that are great for the first responders, but having more of that community for the partners, for the kids, being able to do support groups for the kids is something that's, to me, being able to have those established and a recurring event, that's success to me.
Yeah, I will say that the kids are an interesting group. In fact, if you haven't heard it, we did a podcast with one of the captains at Ventura, Tom Hoffman's teenage daughters. If you haven't listened to it, or if our listeners haven't,
it was a good one. Okay. Yeah,
the perspective is wild. The stuff that I thought they would have cared about, they didn't, and the things that they did care about kind of took me for surprise. But yeah, interesting.
We see that with our own kids too, having to have these conversations with our kids. I was talking with another firewife who's also a therapist. She's in Boston. We were talking last night about just the stories that our kids come to us with. I was explaining to her we had a loss in our friend group last summer, where one of our friends lost their daughter, and she was friends with our daughter. And when I found out about it, it gutted me. And I'm sitting on the floor of our bedroom upstairs, just sobbing. Erik's, of course, on shift, because all of the things happen when they're on shift, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting on the floor, just like a complete wreck. The kids are downstairs, but they wanted to watch Bluey. So they came upstairs to ask me if they could. And my daughter, who just, was 6 at the time, sees me on the floor weeping, says, "Mom, what happened? Did Daddy die?"
Oh, jeez.
And yeah. And I had to go, "Daddy's okay. Daddy's okay." But the fact that my kid immediately goes to that.
Oh my gosh.
No other population has this happen. Like, I joke all the time, like, there's civilian wives and then there's responder wives. Like, civilian wives don't have this. Like, the average guy who's going to an office, like, his kids don't think this. But my kids do. My kids know that there's always a possibility that, like, dad can get hurt on the job, and dad might get, there's all kinds of stuff that they carry, and it's wild. So yeah, supporting those kids is just so important to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have all the time in the world, unfortunately, but I definitely want to give everyone an opportunity. Jason, are you chomping at the bit with something? I don't want to gloss over you. I feel like we just take turns running the conversation in our podcast.
No, I think we're at a good spot. I think we could do a whole nother podcast with you guys. So at some point we'll have to revisit all this stuff. Erik, I want to know if we want to sign up for your event coming up in next month, how do we do that? And is it at a fire station, or is that a commercial kitchen, or how do we do that?
Yeah, it's actually a culinary school in Pasadena. Beautiful location. We're going to take over the 3rd floor. We'll do like a mixer in the beginning, and then we'll go down to the commercial kitchens. We'll set everything up, and then once the food's done, first responders, we're going to do what we do best. We're going to go back. We're actually going to cook that food. We're going to plate the food. We're going to leave the significant others to hang out. And then we'll come in, we'll do a family style dinner. We can send you guys a link for that if anyone's interested. We've still got some seats available.
And you can also sign up for it. The link is also through our Instagram, the 809 Fight for Awareness Instagram account. Yeah, this is why you have me around.
The marketing side right there.
There it is. Yeah. So there's a link directly to that. It is a smaller event than what we're used to doing. So, tickets are pretty limited. I think we're half sold right now. So if anyone is interested, I would recommend picking them up sooner than later. But we are also, for this event, we're partnering with a first responder family owned winery. They're based in Paso. The owners are actually a wife and 2 sons of an LA City captain who died by suicide in 2016. So their dream was to have a winery. And so after he died, she was, like, all right, that's it. We're going to go through with the dream. We're going to do it for him. So they actually it's Stilson Cellars, and they have a wine called Aware that they donate the proceeds to that from that to like NAMI and other organizations. But Stilson will be there pouring some of their wines as well. And, I'm biased because we're wine club members of them and they're friends, but they make some pretty amazing stuff. So they will be there pouring wines to pair it with dinner.
Awesome. And then what's your guys' website? Is it 809 Awareness? Do you have a website as well as Instagram?
It's 809fightforawareness.com. And it's the number 4 instead of FOR. But yeah.
Awesome.
And the same Instagram.
And Maggie, if our listeners want to reach out to you in a professional capacity, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So they can send me an email. It's mindmatterswithmaggie@gmail.com, or they can call or text. My number is 805-669-7892.
And I assume you're taking new clients on?
I am. Yeah. And so
okay.
I also have an Instagram, Mind Matters with Maggie. Either way, okay. All of those are the best way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. This has been a great podcast. I think you guys are amazing. I love what you're both doing, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
I appreciate you.
That was a good podcast. They're quite the dynamic couple. I don't know if that would be a good thing or a bad thing to be married to a therapist who focuses on first responders, right? I feel like that might get kind of tense occasionally, but they seem like they have it figured out, and they do pretty good with it. But what'd you think?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I always write my notes down. My favorite quote from them was, "Control what you can and influence what you can't." That really opened my eyes a little bit. I'm going to have to stew over that one. And then Stilson Cellars. I'm going to check out that one. It seems like they have a really cool story behind how they got started. But yeah, I'm going to check that out. I think that night that they talked about having a couples night out, that's going to be cool too. It sounds like they're just doing cool stuff. And then, anytime we talk to them, the 809 Fight for Awareness comes up, and all I can think about is Russell Skinner's hand held high over that guy that he just completely destroyed over the picture over at Station 3.
Yeah. When you mentioned that quote, they said, I immediately thought of my teenage daughter. Control what you can and influence what you can't. And that's the teenagers in general. You can't control them. The best you could do is try to influence them, but I'm sure it applies to a lot of things. But anyway, awesome. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Another good episode.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.